And welcome back. So the deadline for the submissions of the Bela Act is just 3 days away. The President signed the bill on the 13th of September and announced the decision to delay the implementation date to allow consultations on Section 4 and 5 of the bill that deals with the language and admissions policies by 3 months. Various groups, including SATU and the South African Human Rights Commission, have written to the President to express their concern over the delay. The act has become highly controversial in the Government of National Unity. Let's now speak to the DA spokesperson, Karabo Khakhau. Karabo, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. So where the Democratic Alliance stands with this matter now in terms of the implementation, and I'm going to start off there with the implementation, first of all, of the Bela Act and Clause 4 as well as Clause 5. Is the DA still opposed to the implementation of those two clauses?
Good morning, Aldrin, and good morning, South Africa. Thank you for having me. Yes, we are still opposed. That's why we went through the NEDLAC process and found a suitably compromised position on that. We're still using the clearinghouse mechanism within the GNU to also get through to the final stage of the negotiations. There is significant progress that is being made there, but a whole lot still needs to be done to get us to a point where all parties involved can be happy. And you'd also recall, Aldrin, that we're not just disputing this because it's fun to do so. You'd recall that in 1976, South Africans protested against the power of government to dictate which language people should be taught in. And it is on the same principle that we believe that in democratic South Africa, it cannot be that the government gets to impose, one, which language students get to be taught in, two, which pupils get to be admitted at which schools. It is against the democratic principles that we as the Democratic Alliance believe in. It is also unconstitutional altogether. And fundamentally, those are the reasons why we do not believe that clauses 4 and 5, as they stand originally, should be signed into law. And we're committed to doing everything in our power to make sure that we do not reverse the gains of democracy, but instead we protect them and build on them. So we look forward to seeing what the outcomes are going to be. You also said previously, even outside of this conversation, that the Bela Act and the conversations that are currently happening right now are the biggest test yet for the GNU. And we're very alive to that fact. And that's why, as the Democratic Alliance, we're committed to making sure that we have those conversations in a sober manner. That's why our representatives are working hard to make sure that all mechanisms are exhausted, but also to make sure that all South Africans get to be protected at the end of the day.
Yeah, but Karabo, isn't that a false equivalence there? 1976 was about the introduction of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction unilaterally by the apartheid state, and this is not what this bill speaks about.
Let me tell you why it's not a false equivalence. So you're correct in saying that it was an introduction of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction. What happens right now, what the ANC is proposing with the Bela, as it says, is that the language policies, they get to be dictated by the state outside of there being the school taking responsibilities, and the school governing bodies specifically taking the responsibility of deciding what kind of language policies should be there at school. We believe fundamentally that the power of language policies should lie in the hands of school governing bodies, in the hands of parents who know what's best for their children, particularly because home language also has been proven to have beneficial outcomes, or has shown to bear fruit for students when they learn, because people who learn with their mother tongue have better chances of not only absorbing information, learning, but applying themselves and ultimately being better students and better people outside of the schooling system. And this is something that you cannot negate. It's something that you cannot dispute because it is true. And that's why, as the Democratic Alliance, we remain steadfast where we are right now. The bottom line is that school governing bodies play an integral part in making sure that parents still get to have a say on the type of education and the quality of educations that students get to get, one, and two, the kind of pupils that should be enrolled within schools. That's the trying or the backdoor entrance that the ANC is trying to use here with trying to dictate which student gets to go to which school and which student doesn't get to go to which school is something that we see it for what it is. It is a political kabuki tactic, and we won't have that as the Democratic Alliance. But then again, Aldrin, we are glad that we are making progress. We're very happy that Minister Kwahube exercised her legal responsibilities within the department through the NETLEC negotiations. And that's why we have zero problem with that. She did well. And within the clearinghouse mechanisms, we're doing everything in our power to make sure that we get to the outcomes that we want, that are in the best interests of all South Africans.
Okay. So Minister Kwahube was in conversation with my colleague, Xoli, last night. And I just want you to listen to what she had to say around the implementation of the Act and whether this is in line with where the Democratic Alliance is standing.
The reality here is that the Bela Act is going to be implemented, and it's going to be implemented in its entirety. The only difference here is about how then do we stagger the implementation so that we can have regulations in place that can give effect to each and every section of the Act. The negotiations that are going on within the GNU, that is within the purview of the president. On my side, I am committed to making sure that we implement Bela, particularly those sections that have not been postponed for commencement. There are some good aspects to this bill and to this act, only things like making grade R compulsory. And I believe that if we start to really enforcing and really focusing on the foundation phase, things like matric results will take care of themselves.
So, Karabo, on that, is it in line with the DA's policy for the implementation of the Bela Act in its entirety?
Yeah, Aldrin, look, when we opposed the Bela Act as the DA, we were clear that the only clauses we have a problem with is clauses 4 and 5. And those are the topics of discussion currently. As for the rest of the bill and the rest of the Act, we are in favor for it. I mean, nobody in their right mind can oppose early childhood development because it's important. And we have a lot of ground to cover still to make sure that particularly previously marginalized and poor South African kids get to have early childhood development so that they too, come the time they have to apply for your UCTs and your VITs, they can compete fairly. So that is something that is very clear. And that's why the conversations right now are strictly on 4 and 5. Yeah. And so the minister's quite correct that the only things that are lagging behind right now are 4 and 5. And once we clear that out, the whole act in its entirety will come to life.
Okay, and with that said as well, if the president decides not to change clause 4 and 5 after all of the submissions have been made and after the clearing of house process as well, what does this mean for the Democratic Alliance? John Steenhuisen, one of the points that he has raised before was, and this is on the firing that has been suggested, and some people have speaking on, that if Minister Siviwe Kwahube fails to implement the Bela Act, that she must be fired. And this is the point that has been stressed here by John Steenhuisen. Doing so would signal an end to the government of national unity. So is the DA saying that firing Kwahube will be the end of the government of national unity? And what happens if there is a decision that is taken by the president that actually clause 4 and 5 will be implemented? Because that's what the ANC is calling for.
Two things. One, on the firing of Minister Kwahube, they must try. The Basic Education Ministry is the Democratic Alliance ministry. Nobody gets to tell the Democratic Alliance who gets to occupy that seat. The DA has decided that we have 100% confidence in Minister Kwahube to stay in that position. She hasn't broken any law. She hasn't done anything that makes us question her integrity and her capacity to lead that ministry. And so that won't change. So it must try, one. Two, on what will happen if 4 and 5 are enacted, then the constitutionality of those decisions must be tested in the rule of law, in the court of law. As a party that is a constitutionalist party, a party that is pro the rule of law, we will do everything in our power, even outside of our GNU, to protect South Africans, including, if we must, having to utilize the third arm of state, being the judicial arm of state, to test this. So we're not just going to roll over and let it die, because ultimately, Aldrin, you need to remember, at the heart of what we are disputing here isn't just a modus operandi question of governing bodies which are a safe space for parents to sit in to decide for their own children what language works for their education and which kind of admission policies works not only for their individual households, but for communities and society at large. And that is the fundamental question here that we must be pro. So as for what we will do next, it depends on the sobriety of the conclusion of this negotiation.
Yeah. So was John Steenhuisen quoted correctly that if Siviwe Gwarube is fired, that will mark the end of the government of national unity?
There will be absolutely no reason to fire Minister Gwarube.
No, that's not the question, Karabo. The question is, was John Steenhuisen quoted correctly that if Minister Siviwe Gwarube is fired, this will mark the end of the government of national unity?
That is what John Steenhuisen said. Don't fire Siviwe. That's what he said.
So the government of national unity will come to an end if Siviwe Gwarube is removed?
Yes.